I was not only the developer, I was kind of the customer.
Mm-hmm.
I was selling myself on the innovation that we were creating.
In today's episode, I speak with Vic Nunes, founder and CEO of QMed Innovations. We discuss how innovation can take on unexpected forms, why deep experience in a category can unlock new ideas, and how age can be an advantage when it comes to new ventures. Welcome to Beyond Innovation, a series that breaks down the mystique, explores what works, what doesn't, and what innovation really means with experts who live it every day. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Beyond Innovation. My guest today I have known for years, and I'm really excited to talk to him. His name is Vic Nunes, and he is the founder and CEO of QMed. And we're going to talk about a whole arc of the genesis of this business. And our relationship actually started in 2020.
Right.
Where we had a conversation as you were just sort of getting this whole thing together.
That's
right.
Why
don't you take a minute to introduce your background, who you are, where you came from, and how you started.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is great.
So
it's a great opportunity. I'm really excited for doing the session. I spent the majority of my career in medical device. 30 of those years spent with Johnson & Johnson, the largest healthcare provider in the world. And I'm an engineer by education, but I spent the majority of my career in supply chain management, operations, manufacturing, logistics, all of those things that are branches of engineering.
Yeah.
And I got exposed to just a tremendous number of challenges, both on the supply chain and operationally. So my career, I retired from the company in 2015. Started doing some consulting after that, working with private equity, investment banking, sort of as an industry expert, looking at some M&A activity and potential targets for acquisitions and things like that. And then I came across some really cool technology, and knowing all of the problems and challenges that I had lived through for years at J&J, I started putting two and two together. I started to see the opportunity on how to solve some significant problems. And the more I learned about the technology, the more I got excited about how I saw this thing turn into a real solution.
So give us a sense of what the problem was that you saw from within J&J that this technology then could help resolve.
And I want to try and be fair and not make this into a J&J problem, but it is an industry-wide problem in orthopedics that because we're kind of selling the razor blade and giving away the handle to the razor blade. We need to know where all of those assets are. In our case, in our industry, we're talking about selling implants, and we loan out instrumentation for surgery.
Right.
And those are very costly and expensive, and we need to know at all times where these things are, and that's just not the case in this industry. So there's over 300-400 orthopedic companies out there in the world, and they all have the same problem.
Right.
They can't account for their assets. They don't know where things are at any given time. So when your job is to support a surgical event at a hospital for a patient, you got to make sure that as the implant arrives for that patient, that the instrumentation is also there for you to be able to perform that surgery. So the problem is that we never know where anything is. So our mission was to really find a technology that we can bolt on to these instrument trays and be able to communicate and tell where this device or these devices are at all times.
So when you and I first started talking, I didn't know much about this category. And it blew my mind when you started giving me some of the numbers about the sheer volume of product in the field that is, I'm going to use air quotes, lost every year in this market. Can you sort of dig into that a little bit and
Sure.
give us some sense of just how unusual, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
When you're outside this business, how unusual that is.
Yeah, exactly. So think about, let's talk a little bit about numbers. There's over 7,000 hospitals in the U.S. alone. Pretty much the majority of these hospitals have some sort of trauma center or doing orthopedics. So you really, as an implant manufacturer, you've got two choices. You either supply all of these 7,000 hospitals with equipment, with instruments, or you loan it, meaning that you ship it to them when it's needed and you bring it back when it's not needed, right? So that coordination of shipping and getting it back, that's where everything goes wrong, right? Because it doesn't necessarily get to where it's supposed to be destined to go, and you don't necessarily get it back when you're supposed to. So they're not necessarily lost. They're somewhere. It's just that nobody knows where they are. It could be 10 feet away. It could be 100 miles away.
I mean, that feels like the definition of lost.
True. But, it's someone may know. Yeah. It's just that you just don't have the ability to coordinate events and get stuff to and from as you would want to happen.
And the reason why this is important is because the person who owns the asset only makes money when the asset is in use, or how does that play into the business model?
So without the instrumentation, you can't do an implantation or sell an implant, right? So and the instruments are specific to the implant, right? So it's not as if you can take one company's implant and use somebody else's instruments to do that. So because they're specific, there's a one-to-one relationship. There's been cases where surgeries have been delayed or canceled just because people could not account for the instruments to be at that location on the time of surgery. And that's a problem.
That's a problem.
So
you see all this at J&J. You get out, retire, as you say. Clearly you're not retired.
Not by the stretch of my imagination.
And then what? So then how do you then flip that over and turn that into the venture that you're in now?
Well, so to be fair, when I first started looking at the solution and the technology that was available at the time, we were really repurposing or borrowing what was out there in technology and repurposing it to fit the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And we went through, I want to say, about 2 years worth of learnings, what was working, what was not working, things that were specific to our industry.
Okay.
So our solution is a combination of hardware and software, right? So the hardware provides all of the live data, and then the software displays it in a friendly manner so that the customer can understand, okay, what am I looking at?
And just to ground this for the audience, when you say technology, can you be specific? What exactly is the technology that you're bringing to the table?
So it's an LTEM, which is a cellular device that with sensory technology that's built inside a 2x2 box. It picks up a bunch of data during the day. It picks up some temperature. It picks up location. And then once a day at a specific time, it communicates into our software in the cloud all of that raw data.
Perfect.
We take all of that raw data and then we display it in a way where customers can say, oh, if it's seen these temperatures, it means that it saw an autoclave or a wash cycle at a hospital. If it has the location of a hospital, then I know it's there getting ready for surgery, right?
Got it.
So we take a lot of raw data and massage it and make it more identifiable for our industry.
So the thing that I find so fascinating about the business that you've built is the fact that in our general landscape that we operate in, we do work in asset management, we do work in this sort of generic innovation space. And the idea that the innovation would come from the logistics is a spot that I personally really love, because most people turn their attention to the surgery, to the healthcare providing, not to the fact that you've put this innovation space somewhere completely different from where most people would expect. So can you just kind of, how has that been for you? Like, how does that go as a venture?
So in my 30 years at J&J, right, I lived with this problem all the time, right? We couldn't account, we'd lose things, and we would have to build new instruments to replace the ones that have been lost. So and it's literally hundreds to billions of dollars worth of investment every year. Okay.
Every year.
Every year. It's ridiculous how big this market is. So anyone who's in orthopedics, whether you're a sales rep, whether you're in operations, and the moment you talk about the problem, they go, oh yeah, I get it. I live with it every day. So
Right.
it's not something you really have to sell on the product. But when I was at J&J, I searched. I scorched the earth looking for this sort of technology, but I didn't know what I was looking for. Right? Was it RFID? Was it Bluetooth driven? Was it just software? What is the technology that I'm just looking for a solution? And we couldn't find it. There was nothing available. So when I stepped out of J&J, I knew the problem really well. I just didn't know anything about the technology or solution until I came across it. And I started to inquire and test and evaluate in kind of a quasi-design, kind of experimenting, proof of concept, can this thing do what we want it to do? Until a few years later, there we are with a product doing exactly the way I want it. So I'd like to tell people this. We're not a technology company who's developed some ultra secret technology looking for applications.
Right.
We're an orthopedic knowledgeable company who has developed some technology to go address a specific product.
Right.
Right. Our product today is designed specifically for the orthopedic market.
Right.
But the technology, it's totally expendable to go into a multitude of areas in fields, not just in healthcare, but even outside.
Can you dig in a little bit about what makes the technology that you've put in place unique from other, I'll call them generic asset tracking, asset management tools? What about what you've built is
so the thing that sticks out is that we can survive extreme temperatures. So we can go into an autoclave that runs typically at 132 to 135 degrees Celsius for a period of time. Under pressure, we can survive that hundreds of times, right?
Yeah.
We also provide in the firmware a certain logic that allows us to operate on AA batteries for a very, very long time.
You have AA batteries going through an autoclave process today in your box.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. AA batteries, and we're looking at ways of shrinking that down, possibly getting down to AAA, or maybe reduce the number of batteries.
Fantastic. Right? So the way that you've, as you said, sort of repackaged this allows you to solve this very specific problem in this very specific market, which happens to be also very large.
Right.
So if you think about the way that you got here, can we just back up a little bit and kind of talk about the journey of QMed from an idea sitting on the table somewhere in J&J to where you are today, which has been what, 4 years?
Yeah, it's 2019 was our first seed round.
Okay.
So it's been, I would say going into 4 years into next year.
Can you just give us the sort of journey from nothing to where you are now as a technology startup? I mean, look, you're older than I am. We don't fit this model that well. Right. When people sort of close their eyes and say, okay, this is what a startup looks like, we're not it.
Yeah, definitely
but
not.
The reality is most startup ventures that succeed are started by older founders because of the value of experience that you gain in a place like J&J. So can you just sort of talk us through how you got
Absolutely.
through this?
So, of course, with 30 years, I understand the problem really, really well from all angles, not just me as that operations supply chain person, but the impact to the sales force and the extra work that they have to do to go support that surgery, right? The delivery systems, the warehouse people. I understood all the different angles of the problem, right? So when we first started looking at technology, I had to design a sort of ground rules to say, in this industry, with this customer base, there are certain things that won't work ever, right? And that's because of my experience in the industry. So I was not only the developer, I was kind of the customer. I was selling myself on the innovation that we were creating, if that makes sense, right? So we knew that one of those rules was it had to be completely 100% autonomous.
Okay.
If it had a switch, if I had to scan it, if I had to change batteries, if I had to ask someone to go do something, it was going to fail. Mm-hmm. And that's inherent in my experience, that I know it would be dead on arrival. Right. So then I had to convince my wife to allow us to spend some of our retirement money to get this thing kicked off, right? Because, early on, you don't have the investors, right? Yeah. So you kind of have to do it on your own.
That's a bold move.
Exactly. So you got to, you're supposed to be retiring. And here I am talking to my wife about, I'm thinking about starting a company here. And this technology I don't quite understand. But, I believe in it. The market is there. I know it. So let's give it a try. Let's give it a go. So we went through that process. We went, like I'd said before, we partnered with a couple of companies that had that technology already evolved for other applications.
Okay.
We started to repurpose it, like take their circuit board and batteries and their firmware, and we would put inside of a housing that could go through an autoclave. We literally would wrap it in a blanket. Right, it was a blanket of high-tech material to protect against the heat. Sure. Right, so we were taking common batteries, common circuit boards and stuff, and we learned a lot from that.
Right,
we learned how much they protect, how much they don't, how long they last, all of those things. So we went through that entire process, and then we got to a point where we said two things. One, no insulation.
Okay,
insulation takes too much room. It makes the unit too bulky. And that's not acceptable. So we have to figure that out, how to operate without insulation. Number two, we need to really make this device as small as of a footprint as possible, which means I can't take someone else's architecture of their circuit board and just bring it in because I'm limited. So what had happened is that we had to take all those lessons we learned, and we started to develop our own circuit board design, our own componentry, right? Picking what is the right modem, what is the right battery, what is the right SIM, what is the right, components to go in there for this application. So the product we ended up with is a product that's totally owned by QMed, totally customized, but it was based on the lessons we learned by bringing existing technology on board.
And your background, the interesting thing about this is that your background coming out of, now you have an engineering background by degree.
Yeah. Mechanical.
But practically, it's a supply chain background. Yes. And the process you just went through of understanding the problem, building a set of constraints, going through a learning process, coming out with a solution that's, I'm going to say words that are oftentimes not heard nicely, but they're good enough. Because it would have been very easy to spend 10 more years making this thing perfect.
Yeah.
But when you're a startup, there's a constraint of cash.
Exactly. Big constraint.
And I feel like you guys have navigated this set of circumstances really, really well to now have gotten a product to market.
Right.
That's going to deliver that service exactly to the level that it needs to be delivered for the market you're going after. Right. And that is unusual in startups. Yeah,
it is unusual. Not to say that we didn't have enough roadblocks along the way. There was a few times that there was red flags that came up, and I would say, okay, where do we go now? What do we do, right? So we had enough failures along the way, and we learned from those failures, but we just kept on figuring it out, right? I think looking at a macro level, I would say that the last 3 years have been extremely efficient to get us from a concept to a pretty good or a very unique product, the only of in a market today, right? So, but in between, it didn't feel that way.
Yeah, sure.
There were times there was very, very
I mean,
iffy.
when you and I've had conversations over the years, and there's been sort of ebbs and flows to the feeling that you get. But at the same time, this is pretty fast. I mean, from when we first spoke in I think it was probably fall 2020.
Yep.
It's now winter 2022.
Right.
And you're on the market.
Right.
That's quick.
And not only that, we actually started selling product or pre-selling in March of this year.
Wow.
So a good 6 to 9 months. We ended up with a 18 customer list, over 3,000 devices on order prior to shipping one product.
That's excellent.
Out the door. That speaks to the demand.
So we've spent a lot of time on the hardware side. Can we turn our attention, because one of the other things that you mentioned, which is something that we talk about in this practice all the time, is being able to look at a problem from a multitude of lenses and see it almost in the round rather than from only one point of view. So you said very early on, you're a hardware and a software company.
Right.
Can you give us a sense now from the other side of this, now that the hardware is going out into the field?
Right.
Give us a sense of the software side and what that innovation brings to sort of the market that you've
So the
carved out.
software, I don't want to say that it was a simpler thing to develop. Since I didn't have to develop any of the code myself, I guess I could say it was simpler. But the reason why I say it's simpler, because I know as a customer, I know what I want to see.
Sure.
Right. So we had to identify a basic platform that existed on asset management, so we didn't have to go recreate all of the code, the basic code to allow you a password to get in and users and all of that, security and so forth. So we partnered with a company that had that sort of platform established, and then we just piggybacked on that with our own requirements, the things that our customers wanted to do. So it was simpler, and we had time to develop that while we're perfecting the hardware and working on troubleshooting that, right? So today, I'm extremely pleased with the quality of our software, and I can see it in customers' eyes. When they see it, they go, oh, wow. So I can actually see where the asset is.
Yeah.
I can pull out the raw data, export it into an Excel file, and I can do my own sort of, investigations or queries. And so it's a very powerful engine that we have.
Great.
But it's really poised to grow from that. We're not settled in what we're offering today.
It's interesting because, we hear this all the time, but you really embody it, which is that the hardware is, you take it for granted. Like, it just has to do its job, but you never really want to know it's there. All of the touch points are on the software side.
Right.
And you said at the beginning, like, if I have to touch this thing, I'm dead on arrival.
Right.
So coming from a hardware background, which is you, how did that transition occur where that sort of knowledge became realized in the business that you're building?
Well, let me answer it this way. For the first year, we were all hardware. Our mindset was 100% because there was no reason to invest a dime in the software if the hardware was not going to do what we wanted to do, right? Sure. So that became our serious, significant focus very early on. But we always knew, because I knew the lens of the customer and I knew what they wanted to see, the software is the ability to demonstrate to the user what they want to see, but you can only see what the raw data provides you, right? So making sure that the hardware had the right sensory technology in it to pick up the little bits of data that we want, and as often, I'll give you an example, an autoclave cycle. So I thought it was important early on to document the autoclave cycle, to see it, and be able to distinguish a wash cycle, a decon cycle from an autoclave cycle.
Okay.
Right. And they both see similar temperatures, but different profiles.
Okay.
Different signatures, right? So I wanted to differentiate because I want to be able to tell in my software to our customer that, oh, your device just went through an autoclave. Your device just went through a wash cycle. Being at this location, which is a hospital, gone through an autoclave and a wash cycle, it means that it went into surgery. Right. So it saw one cycle. So now I'm counting cycles.
I see.
right? So when someone says, I have this tray that's worth $20,000, I'm getting reimbursed for the implant $3,000, so I need at least 7 surgeries to pay for the cost of that, instrument kit, right? But I have no idea today how many surgeries that instrument kit has been in, right? So I don't know if it takes me a year, 2 years, or 3 months to pay off the investment, right? Well, I can tell people that now because we're picking up all these bits of data and we're putting it into our software and producing a 4th piece of data that is a derivative of the raw data that we picked up.
Interesting.
Things like patient safety.
Yeah.
So think about this for a minute. The majority of FDA recalls is because of instrumentation, complaints in a hospital that an instrument didn't cut, didn't drill, didn't ream, right? Or the torque on some instrument was off, was not calibrated, right? Well, if the person who designed the instrument knows that that thing has a life of 20 or 30 surgeries, well, how do you know how many it's been if we don't even know where the instrument kit is, right? So now we're counting surgeries. Now we can put alerts, send it back to the customer and say, that kit has been in 30 surgeries, so here's a red light to tell you that you got to bring that kit back. Don't allow any more surgeries so that you can calibrate, you can sharpen, you can replace any of the instrumentation, right? There's a patient safety aspect to this. Patients, many times, a half-hour surgery, orthopedic surgery, or 45 minutes, may take an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours because an instrument didn't do what it was supposed to. So now they need to get a replacement.
Interesting.
The patient's under anesthesia. There's all this risk.
Right.
So patient safety is a big thing, and FDA is always very concerned about did everything go the way it's supposed to in surgery.
Right.
So we're a piece of that now with that data.
Interesting. So how if you try to roll back the clock to 2019, that data component that you just described, how much of that did you learn, and how much of that did you come in the door saying, I think I know this?
I would say 95% of the problem related how and what we wanted the software and the hardware to do. I think I knew that.
Okay.
95%. We've perfected some things with some additional input from folks and stuff, but 95% I knew. As far as what technology to use, I knew absolutely nothing. Zero.
Wow.
It was completely talk to people, listen to them, learn, and then ask a lot of questions.
That's great.
Why doesn't this work? Why does that work? What do you mean by that? I used to hear things in telecom that they talk about, being able to, to basically put a zone around a certain address, and anything that penetrates that zone. And that was foreign to me.
Right.
I had no idea what that meant. And the more we talked about it, we said, well, okay, in this application, that's not going to work. Right? Bluetooth is not going to work in this application. It has to be GPS won't work in this application.
Right.
Because we're inside buildings. GPS needs blue sky.
Sometimes in the basement.
Sometimes in the basement where cell phones don't even work. Right? So we have to figure all of that out. Right? And those things we had to learn right from scratch.
Right. Interesting. So if you project yourself forward, say 3 years, where's all this going? What's the grand vision?
The opportunity with QMed and its technology is really endless. We have a funnel and a pipeline of product development that we must have at least a dozen products that are line extensions to clearly innovative. So we're looking at things, for example, not just to tell you where things are. Asset management is very important, but how about being able to pick up data in a different way, in a label?
Okay.
If we took that technology and produce it into a flat profile with an adhesive that you can put on a package, and now you're getting that sort of data. Maybe there's applications in tissue where temperature becomes an issue because you got live tissues. You need refrigerated sort of products. we're looking at sterility.
Okay.
How do you know something is still sterile? How do you measure sterility?
Right.
Being able to measure and communicate that, right? So I definitely see QMed in the healthcare space. We may license some components of the technology into other markets. Our market is specifically healthcare and medical device, but there's a lot of opportunity out there today.
So you're really looking at asset management from a much broader perspective in the healthcare market, but from a much broader perspective than show me where my widget is and tell me what happened to my widget.
I would actually describe this more as providing real-time data.
Okay.
Right? And with sensory technology and really innovative sensory technology. There may be applications in our technology because we do everything cellular. It's a cellular IoT device, right? But we may find applications to partner with Bluetooth, with RFID, right? In certain applications. But we see really collecting data. And what do I do with that data tomorrow, and how do I present that data? And we may have, as we do today, our customers are the orthopedic companies.
Right.
But our customers within the orthopedic company are several stakeholders.
Okay.
Right? So it's not just the logistics people saying, tell me where my kid is, but the compliance people may want to know about that patient safety aspect of it. Right? The product development may want to know about the life of instrumentation and how many cycles it's seeing before you're tossing the instrument.
Got it.
So there's a lot of data that different stakeholders may want to have.
It's a fascinating transition that I feel like companies at the beginning of their progression, we all think we know where we're going, but in your case, because you had the experience and because you had the clarity of the problem,
right,
your ability to utilize new technologies with a series of really well-defined constraints is a big reason why you are where you are in the time frame that you got here.
I think I've often thought about this. 30 years of experience in this industry. Could I have done the same thing 20 years ago? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
And I wouldn't have had the depth and knowledge. I wouldn't have had the confidence, the fortitude to stick with it when things don't go perfectly. I think there is some things that it takes a young person to do, and then there's other things that you really need a lot of experience in a specific problem, especially in our world, which we are really a pioneer.
Right.
Right. And someone very early told me about pioneers. Those are the guys with the arrow on their back, face down in the dirt. Yeah. So, and I said, well, I hope not to be that person, but we're really pioneers. So it's not just being an innovator. We wanted to find a solution to a very large problem, but not just any solution.
Right. It
had to be something really innovative.
That's fantastic. Well, this was great. And you touched on a lot of things, and I am really happy you came.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. This has been fun.
Super good.
Excellent. Thank you.